Hi, and welcome to our session called A Year of Living Dangerously, Resilience After COVID and Killer Hornets. Today, I'm happy to be here with a panel of experts. My name is Lisa Lee. I'm the Chief Security Advisor and the Security, Compliance, and Identity Business Development Lead for Vertical Industries at Microsoft. And with me, I have the amazing Laura Diener, who's the Chief Information Security Officer at Northwestern Mutual. I have the fantastic Helen Patton, who's advisory CISO at Cisco, and the always wonderful Patty Titus, who's the Chief Information Security Officer and Chief Privacy Officer for Markel. So we are so happy to be with you. There is nothing like the year or year and a half now almost that we've seen in terms of global pandemic, raging wildfires, an active hurricane season, major cyber attacks, and of course, killer hornets that would force CISOs to really be on their A game. Before we jump into the real technical aspects of our talk, I do want to remind you that we're going to be taking questions throughout. And so we hope that you'll put your questions in the chat and we'll try to address those for you. And before we jump into the really technical aspects also, we're going to talk first about the impact on people like ourselves, as well as the teams that we work with. And so we're going to kick off there and start there for you. Helen, can you share just a little bit of your observations or reflection on mental health in general after the year and a half that we've had?
Yeah, it's been a really tough year for all of us. And I think, when COVID first hit, we jumped in like we do in security all the time. And we went into firefight mode and we're good at it and we practice it. And so we were all sort of there. And then month one became month two became month three, and month three added something, whether it was a wildfire or a killer hornet. And now here we are. And so I think in the beginning, fine. I think it dragged and we all had to regroup and work out how we were going to manage ourselves, but also help our teams manage through the mental health issues. And then I think, we're hitting this cadence of this has been going on for so long that we have to work out, we have to sort of be constantly monitoring our mental health, because on any given day it could be great or it could be really bad. So it's really been a tough journey. But I think hopefully as a community, we've learned a lot over the time. But yeah, definitely something for the record books.
It is definitely. Laura, do you think that workload has had much of an impact on mental health, or what kind of impact did it have?
Yeah, great question. And just want to echo my fellow panelists, Helen, great points. I think what we saw and what we're continuing to see is, just a lack of preparedness and the pressure of ensuring that we have to continue business as usual, or even at the beginning, and then of course when the months kept going by, business as usual. And all of that obviously has a strain on anyone, but especially folks who are caregivers or have family members at home or children doing double duty, while also working through the weekend on that change request to make sure that we all can participate in business as usual, whether that's weekend work for remote access or, again, something that perhaps we were not prepared for before the pandemic. And it definitely took a toll on several members of the community that I've spoken with, my own team at the time. You could sense it, you can feel the stress, you can feel the overworkedness. And I do think that as a result, we saw some good things coming out of it, which is just an appreciation for that work-life balance. Whether that was through ERGs that like most companies have, or if it was some of the articles we saw about how important it is to take the time for mental care.
Yeah, I know it's been a tremendous strain on people in a lot of different ways. And, that could be, like you said, from a matter of health aspects, physical health aspects, the mental health, the emotional impact of maybe losing someone close to you, either through the pandemic that we saw, or even some other just normal parts of life, losing people that way. But Patty, what have you seen in terms of, what have companies been trying to do to alleviate some of that impact or to address it? What sorts of things have you seen companies doing?
Oh, I think there's been a lot of partnership with our HR department on how we're safeguarding our people as they're coming into the offices for those that have to because they're critical workers. How are we encouraging our management people to reach out to folks that are at home, making sure that people that might be living alone in Chicago, for example, have a connection back to the company if they need it. So we actually allowed people to come back to the office for mental health reasons. There were some people, I know it's hard to believe, but when you get outside of Richmond, Virginia, which is where I'm at, it gets pretty rural pretty quickly. And so connectivity is a problem. And everybody was excited that this new satellite internet is coming into the foray, but it came a little bit late. If it were here last year, it would have been better. And I also think that their companies are really investing in, programs like Calm or Headspace, which are apps that are on your phone, and the company is giving it to as a benefit. And families that have children, we invested in a product called Crate Joy, where they got a box full of things for the kids to do. And so really thinking outside the box of how do we keep connected to our people when we're such a connected company and we truly believe in the stronger together motto.
Yeah, and I know even with Microsoft, we've done things like shorten meetings, to try to give people a little bit more lead time in between. So there's been lots of little, I think, techniques that have been impactful just in the day-to-day, and then the larger stories like some that you shared, which is fantastic. What about some of the unexpected challenges? I think remote work is something that comes up a lot. Lots of things that have happened there. But Laura, what surprised you most about remote work? Or what surprised your team most? What was most challenging for employees, maybe even for new employees?
Yeah, great question. I think everybody has a bit of a different experience, but what I've heard that has been very similar is just the, again, unpreparedness of it. I know I sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but I think even little things like I don't have a laptop, right? And how are we going to commission a fleet of laptops out to a group of employees that are scattered throughout the globe? That is not an easy undertaking for the folks that have to ensure that is happening safely in a secure manner, but also just the people themselves really feeling anxious because they didn't have that capability at home. And so what was surprising again was still the preparedness, but also just the community that came together to get it all done. Yes, it was stressful times, but we were still able to make it work for the better of the business. So it was stressful, but great to see. It was great to see everybody coming together.
Patty, anything you would add about remote work? Anything special that impacted your team or that you did?
What was interesting is we had all the tech in place. We're fully virtualized all the way to the desktop, which is great. So we could pivot over a weekend. The problem was tech adoption. So people were used to coming into a building every day, logging into their terminal and getting on. They didn't know that, what's an RSA token? What's multi-factor authentication? What do you mean I can get onto the network using my home computer? So there were some challenges with that. And then, of course, everybody's kids are working from home or doing schoolwork from home. So sometimes you had households that had one computer for, well, I don't know, Laura, what do you have? 4 kids? So imagine one computer for 6 people, and it's like everybody's got to pick a time slot. There were people trying to work off of a Kindle Fire. And, that might get you to email, but that's about it. So it's just the challenges with technology adoption, I think, were a little bit stark to us.
And Helen, I know you really saw some striking experiences, partly because of the location that you were in. You were at Ohio State at the time, but also partly just being in higher ed and just the impact from an educational standpoint. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw?
Yeah, it was interesting. Higher ed uses WebEx, Zoom, all of the online platforms more than all other verticals combined. And when COVID happened, we went from, in the Ohio State experience, we went from about 10% of our classes being taught online to about 75% of our classes having at least some aspect of it taught online, if not completely. That meant faculty members had to know how to teach online. We had to recreate classes in the middle of semesters, recreate syllabi in the middle of a semester. We had a hospital on campus, so we had patients coming and going. We were working with county health officials, so contact tracing, all of those things were happening. And then we had students who were sent home. So in the beginning, at least. Later, we had to then work out how to do constant testing of said students as well. But in the beginning, we sent them home, which was all well and good, except our national infrastructure wasn't there. So just as Patty was referring to, a lot of rural people without really good broadband, but actually even within the cities, there are sort of internet deserts that are going on there as well. So as a university, we wanted to make sure not only could our employees do their jobs, but could our students continue to learn. So in some ways, we had to get really creative. We sent hotspots home with certain students. We set mobile hotspots up in parking lots. So we had students who were driving to a parking lot and taking classes, doing homework from their cars, those kinds of things that were going on. And of course, while all that was happening, trying to make sure that our research, and research can last for many decades, right? So making sure that research wasn't interrupted, and that included taking care of animals and plants and amoebas and DNA strands and all of those kinds of things, and making sure that they were protected as well. So really, trying to work out in this very difficult environment, what are your crown jewels? Is it the life safety of your students? Is it the life safety of your multi-generational DNA strand? Is it, where do we what? So really complicated risk management decisions and discussions going on.
Wow. Well, let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about the idea of, when did security matter? And, what were some of the real security aspects and questions and difficulties that came up? Patty, you have, probably one of my favorite stories around related to remote work, but, related to when does security matter? Tell us about what happened and kind of the risks that you uncovered in terms of having people work from home.
So there were a couple of things that we knew about, but when you're faced with a crisis and everybody's got to work from home, it's a little bit more in your face, so to speak. And we're an insurance company and we issue checks to people. And I know that's hard to believe because we're all in high tech, that people don't trust those direct deposits. And that some people actually don't have bank accounts. And so, or their bank account is a bank account in a building, not an online bank account with a debit card. And so we had to cut checks. And that's important because people live on those checks month to month to month, and they rely on those checks. And you can't just take a check printing machine and move it home. It's got to be in a facility that's vetted by a financial institution, and there's all kinds of regulations around it. And so we had to become much more creative about how we were allowing those people with critical functions to get into our facilities and try to limit exposure to non-critical people that just wanted to be at work because they didn't want to be at home with, the dog and the kids and the hubby. And so how, finding a way to balance that was a challenge. And, then on the other interesting part was mail pickup. So we don't think about that. We just walk out to our mailboxes and pick up the post. Some of our business is very tied to delivery of mail. There are fines, regulatory fines, if documentation doesn't get filed in a specific way. And one would think, the world should be paperless by now because we're a digital economy, but we are still very we are still very paper-based. And it meant people needed to go and collect those papers, open those envelopes. And in the beginning, if you recall, we didn't really understand this pandemic. We thought that it stuck to everything and you could get it by touching a piece of paper that somebody might have sneezed on. And, we just didn't know anything. So you basically had to issue hazmat suits to people to be able to just open the mail. It was kind of like anthrax, all over again. And so, of course, now we've learned a lot more about it. But nevertheless, it was still a shift in our mentality of how we dealt with critical people who really need to keep the business functioning, cutting checks, opening mail, and then the essential people who really wanted the letter. In case internet was down, they could go in and work from the office. And it's not that, it's hard to tell somebody your job's not critical because everybody's important to a company. But there are, obviously, it became very apparent, there are people that are less critical and more essential than the critical people. I hope that explained it, Lisa.
No, that did. And I'm just curious, Laura, you're still in financial services, but you were actually at S&P at the time, I think, or for, a big part of the year. Was there anything odd about having traders working from home? Did that come up at all in your part of the world?
Yeah, well, S&P doesn't have traders, but again, in the conversations, Lisa, you've been to FSI SAC, so when we talk to other folks in financial services, what I've heard is there were some flexibility that had to happen, but also the securing of even a home network in certain situations. So those critical, to use your words, Patty, right? Those essential workers, absolutely. Again, where I was at the time, we considered a lot of the people in IT very critical, and some of the other folks that were doing our core business. So we saw some of that, definitely.
Very good. And so, Helen, in your role at Ohio State, you perhaps more than anyone I can think of had some not only big risks on your shoulders, but it was the variety of risks that were there. Can you, tell a little bit about the story? When did security start to matter at Ohio State?
Yeah, so when COVID first hit, security didn't really matter. We weren't focused on it. We were really just trying to get all of our business processes online. Chemistry classes that were still being done with chalk on Blackboard had to automatically sort of make its way online. So there were a number of task forces that were set up. It wasn't probably until 2 or 3 months in, and we were starting to then work on things like, how do we bring students back to campus safely? So, yeah, obviously we were making sure that people could work from home, and we were dealing with VPNs and multi-factor and all of those kinds of things. But, what's the role of security then in trying to get back to some kind of normalcy? For example, one of the things that we were looking at is, could we use some of the logging that the security team does on our network and our wireless network to understand where people were physically on campus? We would use that for a couple of things. We would use it to understand where we had a lot of high traffic and maybe we needed to disperse that traffic. You can imagine we have cafeterias because our students live on campus. We have at the time it was about 50,000 students who were living on campus. So whereas the rest of the state was saying no restaurants, we're like, well, someone's got to eat sometime. So how do we handle that? So looking at where we had high traffic, but also things like if people got sick, they came to campus because we had a hospital on campus. So being able to say, okay, we're going to throw up a red flag if someone shows up where they shouldn't. Well, there were very few places where people shouldn't go. So yeah, we had a hospital. We had people living on campus that needed food. We had online learning that was going on. So we certainly had to think about things like, are we still going to offer online exams? Do we have to do then online proctoring of exams? What's the security around the authentication mechanisms that are happening? How do we make that light touch if they don't have really great broadband? A lot of those kinds of things. We have a hotel on campus that actually had to get converted into another dorm because we had to find more bed space and more quarantine for infected COVID students bed space. So we commandeered some hotels. And, you know, there's other things that are going on that needed to be minded. So, yeah, it was a particularly difficult thing. And to everyone's credit who's working in higher ed, you know, people went, how hard can it be? You go from on-premise learning to off-premise learning. Well, there's a lot that's involved. And even now, Ohio State tests 30,000 students a week. They're doing more COVID testing than 7 or 8 states combined. And the infection rates are staying quite low. So, yeah, there's a lot to think about.
Goodness. So, Laura, in your world, or maybe just thinking more broadly, how long did security matter? Or, you know, in your case, when did it matter? But how long did it matter?
Yeah, I mean, it always, you know, mattered, right? I think that's always the elephant in the room with us security practitioners is, of course, it matters to us. We're very passionate about it. That's why we're here, you know, but again, if you take it into context of, am I able to do my job? Can business continue? You know, we did see some, you know, being flexible. We saw the need to, and really, you just had to think about it from a risk decision-making perspective, not a, this is my standard, I have to stick with it, and no detractions from it. Can't be that rigorous during a situation that you haven't planned for, honestly. I don't think anybody thought that this is where we were going to be, right? So it always mattered, but it became more of you know, how important is it right now, and how long can we live with it, right? And so you know, just perfect example is around you know, just patching, right? So of course we have to patch, but we had to think about you know, how we were going to be able to do that while also dealing with the saturation on the network, right? But one thing definitely mattered from a security perspective is that nobody wanted to fall prey to the BEC phishing that we saw more and more during the pandemic. And so on one side, we needed to relax, but on the other side, we wound up actually increasing a lot. And a lot of the technologies or even the processes that we wanted to put in place got accelerated as a result. So really have to use good judgment in those situations, definitely.
Right. Well, so that's a good segue for us, you know, to talk about some of the technology changes that happened as a result of COVID, some that were driven by COVID, and some that just continued, you know, from our normal business that, but we had to figure out new ways to do it. Patty, I'm guessing most organizations over the course of, you know, a year had to replace some equipment. What was the experience around, you know, doing that sort of thing, whether it was refresh or other aspects?
Yeah, so it's really a challenge when, you know, if you're a high tech company, you probably have depots around the globe, right? I'm thinking Microsoft probably has like depot set up, you know, of their Microsoft stuff. But if you're an insurance company in Richmond, Virginia, it's how do I get equipment to people that don't want to leave their house? So now I'm going to ship it. But of course, as the privacy officer, I'm also worried about the fact now we're collecting people's privacy information so we can ship equipment to them in a service ticket. And I'm like, you know, we really had to get creative. So there's the shipping of equipment. There is the, hey, by the way, you might be printing at home, but you need to shred what you're doing. So it's not like you've got the bins where you can get rid of the paper. And then you've got things like, I need to make sure that I have redundancies because I'm in the middle of a pandemic, and then, oh, look, there's a hurricane coming. And my division in one area that got hit by the hurricane was out of power. And it used to be, well, we'll just pull in the trailer, you know, the BCP trailer. We lovingly renamed it the COVID tube. And so nobody was going to get in the COVID tube. And so we had to really pivot and think differently about how we were going to do this, but making sure that we had redundancies so that disbursements were getting paid, right? Companies expect to get paid when they're doing business with you. So how would we support our European operations out of our US operations? There's an issue with currency. So there's different currency in these countries, and how do you change currencies depending on where you're at? So it really was watching humans do what they do best, and that is march to the cause and flex and be agile in their approaches. And the people would just step up to the plate and say, I'll take care of it. I got it. I'm going to do it. And it was just really kind of an amazing time. But getting technology to people was really, really, really a challenge. So we created like a curbside pickup in some of our locations, or just, we brought in a bunch of laptops and monitors that we were giving to the critical people so they could get set up with dual monitors at home. And so it was a definitely, and I have to openly admit, I bought more tech last year for my house than I even want to admit, but thank you, Amazon.
No, definitely. and it's funny because you mentioned shipping, and it's amazing how even the shipping was such, a big challenge. Because I remember we wanted to send something to a customer who, kind of helped us with a call that we needed to do. And we just wanted to send a thank you gift, but it was going from the US to the UK. And, first we had to consider, could we even do that? Second, we needed their private information, so to speak. Third, they were in complete lockdown, would the package even get there? So we finally just gave up. But, it's just amazing some of the challenges that have happened. Laura, you mentioned a little bit about patching earlier, but I'm just curious, did anything change about the approach to patching?
Yeah, I'd mentioned the kind of flexing of some of our rigorous standards. I mean, we still really want people to patch critical vulnerabilities, if they're urgent, obviously as fast as possible. But the 30 days is still pretty standard, I think, in most companies. But how do you do that? Again, like I said, while the saturation, I mean, we found people watching obviously Netflix for 8 hours a day, which was an easy thing for us to shut down. But shutting down patching, it's that risk versus reward kind of situation. And so we did have to think about what was acceptable for the period of time. We did have to come up with, let's say, the authentication flow. If we were instituting some new technology, there'll be some drift on the password. Is that okay? We are taking some risks, but how serious are they, and how long are we willing to live with those? And I mean, it was almost every day, especially in the beginning. We were just seeing these different things. There's just like, you know what? We just got to go through with this and be comfortable. And then we would circle back, through our risk management framework. We would circle back and say, okay, we gave you, 180-day pass here, right? As the pandemic kept going. Is it good for us to get back to that standard? And then again, we saw a lot of rallying around it and a lot of fixing of it. But we had to really think about those technology changes that we really wanted, but how is that actually going to happen in reality? And then, of course, how can we flex, right? That was really, really important for us.
And so, Helen, we did talk about, remote access. And I know there were lots of meetings with customers to help them with that. But, what did we learn from that? What do you think the big takeaway is from, all the work we did to get people the access that they needed to work remotely?
Yeah, I think what you'll start to see, if you haven't already seen it, is security teams and CISOs really having now to double down to make sure that their security tech stack is aligned with whatever the new technology stack is at their companies. I think, for some companies, COVID hit and they accelerated all their security stuff right along with it. And then there were other verticals, other companies that sort of said, nope, we're putting a hold on any non-essential spend and we're considering security non-essential spend. Okay, well, that was 18 months ago now. We can't wait any longer for that. So I do think there's an opportunity for security folks to, if they haven't already done it, to take a step back and say, let's look at where the tech strategy has gone over the last 18 months and let's make sure that our security stack is aligned to that. And if it's not, now we've got to really sort of put it down. I think the other thing is, we're seeing more and more O days this year than we saw all of last year. And so this question of how do you manage a device and how do you manage a device remotely not only from an IT operations perspective, but also a security incident response and forensics perspective is another one that we're going to have to really keep our eye on. So, I think it's actually a good thing for security, but we've got to inject ourselves back into the conversation.
Very good. Well, I'm going to shift us into kind of the last section that we're going to talk about, because I want to make sure we have time to cover that. And that's about planning and maybe the changes that came with planning. Patty, I think you or someone mentioned earlier the differences in maybe who's critical or the critical people planning. Can you talk a little bit about how that went, or how you've changed your focus on that?
Yeah, so obviously in the security program, you've got everybody's important. Again, it's hard to tell somebody that their job is less important, but your security operations is pinnacle. So I got to monitor everything that's going on, because we're in a degraded state as a globe. What a better time for the bad guy to target a company than when they're vulnerable, because they're trying to get people working from home, and maybe they're split tunneling their VPNs. Maybe they're not long hauling people back into a primary data center before they go out to the internet. Everybody was so off balance. And then you saw that massive rise in ransomware. Like I think I saw a stat of 719% increase. I mean, it's staggering, right? And so, as you're thinking about, how do I make sure my operations are running? What we actually did is I sat down with my direct reports and we looked at who's really critical to our operations. Identity and access management. If people can't get access, that's kind of a problem. If the security operations center is down, kind of a problem. So what we did is we actually cross-trained within my organization people in governance, risk, and compliance into identity and access management, engineering architects, cross-trained into operations. So we had kind of this way that if a cluster of folks happened to all get ill at the same time, we had redundancies. So what we actually did is I took that to our safeguarding people, and they actually rolled that out more or less across the company and said, who are your critical people across the business? Who are your redundancies? So each leader then took a look and said, I have this critical function. I have these people who do them. And I also own business resilience. So it was kind of nice because we had the critical controls and we were able to help influence where we needed to make sure that we had critical people.
And so Laura, and I know we just got a couple of minutes left here, but I want to get a couple of questions in before we end. Laura, how's this changed, the focus on planning, or, has it changed our approach to planning overall?
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, nobody was ready for this. And so my thoughts are plan, even if you think it's outrageous, it's probably not, right? And never have I seen a solid and informed asset inventory more important than during this time. So that, again, to Patty's point, you have to know where you're critical, not just your staff, but your assets, right? You have to know where they're at so that you're not surprised. So those are the big takeaways for me on the planning side.
Helen, how about you? Like, is there anything that we know there's a lot that we didn't plan for, but how do we take that forward? How do we make that so it's better next time? This may not be the end of the big surprises.
Yeah, for me, I think the main thing was we were trying very hard with my team pre-COVID to leave enough space in their day to handle unexpected events. So not to have them running at 100% or 110 or 150% capacity, but maybe to be running at 80%. And if they really were running at 80%, they could use that extra time for innovation or extra learning or whatever, but it was also sort of free time for unexpected events. We've been running our folks way over 100% for 18 months. There's no end in sight to that. And there's no guarantee that even after we get back to normal, that all those other things, those killer hornets, whatever that is in 2021, 22, is going to come back. So, I think we have to get better at saying no to some things. And I think we have to get better at planning for the unexpected, which means planning for space in the team so that we're not burning them out.
Very good. Patty, any final thoughts on planning? Anything particular you want to add?
No, I don't think so. Thanks.
Okay, good. Well, let's get into our last, our key takeaways. So we'll go to Laura first. Laura, what have you learned you didn't know? What was your most important lesson? What would you do different next time?
Yeah, great questions. Really quickly, so just create all those resiliency scenarios. Again, even if they sound a little outrageous, still create those. Really test them out. I think testing is super important. So those are the key takeaways for me. And then, of course, overlaying that with the business impacts, understanding the appetites of your business, and making sure those all tie together so that when it happens again, you're ready.
Great. Patty, what would be your big lessons, your big takeaways?
I think it's all about the people. So you got to take care of the people, and then the people will take care of you. And that's not just in a time of crisis. That's even when there isn't a crisis. And then I think the other thing that's really important to think about is equality and equity. This particular pandemic and all of the other issues that were going on across the globe showed it was very in our face. We have an equality and an equity issue that we need to deal with.
Fantastic. And Helen, we'll finish with you. What were your big lessons or your big takeaways?
Yeah, I would tell you if anyone had all of this stuff on their bingo card for 1919 to 2020, the last 18 months, they should have taken out a lottery ticket. No one could have predicted this. And I think the takeaway for me is not to be shy about asking for what we need as security professionals. Don't go, well, they just don't have room to think about it right now. I'm not going to ask for it. Ask for it anyway. Be assertive about asking for what you need, and continue to really try and push that envelope, because the world is not going to wait for us to get our politics right.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a great way to end the session. Thank you, ladies, so much. This has been fantastic, and we look forward to addressing all the questions. You can still get a couple of those in probably. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.